Hi, welcome to my presentation, Increasing Agility Through Continuous Delivery. This is actually just an experience report that I and my team gave to the rest of the teams at work. We were trying to figure out how to better get to agile development, how to be better, more agile. And we decided that we would use continuous delivery to get us there. And this is a presentation about how that actually worked and why that worked. So first question I would want everyone to ask themselves is, why Agile? Why do you want to be an Agile development shop? And the biggest reason that we can see to be an Agile shop is that Agile development is all about mitigating risk. But how it does that is through one thing in particular, and this is why most shops that claim to be Agile, I don't believe are actually Agile. And that is that mitigating this risk actually requires small incremental releases. And you can see that if you go to the 12 principles behind the Agile Manifesto, the very first one is our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. And there it is, continuous delivery. There are two other principles in there that specifically speak about delivering often, though. The other one being deliver working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months with a preference to the shorter time scale. And then the other one would be working software is the primary measure of progress. Now, this may not seem like it's specifically about small incremental releases, but it is. And I'll get into that a little bit later. And it's a very interesting principle. But what you'll see, for the most part, if you use any Agile methodology, such as Scrum, this second one here actually is what most of that is based off of. So deliver working software frequently. So if you go on a 2-week sprint, which is what we use, at the end of that sprint, you are supposed to be releasing something, delivering something anyways. Well, continuous delivery just takes us a bit further, right? So if you can deliver something at the end of 2 weeks, why not at the end of 1 week? And if you can do that, why not every day? And if you can do that, why not every change? So every commit becomes a potential release candidate. That is continuous delivery. So what we realized on our team is that this does not mean that it's going to be fast. And that is very important to kind of come to grips with when you think about what we did, how we use continuous delivery to make us more agile. Okay, so for the most part, we used to think about, we want to be agile. We want to get better at being agile. And once we get better and better at this, we will ultimately arrive at continuous delivery. What we decided to do was actually flip that and start with continuous delivery and let that lead us to being more agile. And it worked. It wasn't without its bumps, but it did work. So what we did is we just made our definition of done equal to deployed. This, I don't want to say forced us into, but it kind of did force us into small incremental releases. And we saw a lot of benefits from that, specifically from the small incremental releases. So when you talk about being agile, we believe that this is at the core of that. The small incremental releases will help you to be more agile. So just some of the benefits that we saw, and I want to get a little bit deeper into today. First, we saw faster feedback. We saw repetition. This is the good kind. We realized less risk. We were able to deliver value sooner. And we found, surprisingly, that it naturally promotes best practices. This is my favorite part of this whole presentation. We'll get to that at the very end. But for now, let's talk about fast feedback. So fast feedback, when we got faster feedback, it allowed us to constantly align our priorities with business needs. Now, I know this sounds like a lot of buzzwords, but it is actually something that was very useful to us. For example, if you were to think of normal development, you've got where your product currently is. You've got an idea that the product people come to you with, and they have an idea of how to get there. They give that idea to development, and we step away for 6 months and hand them this. Okay? It's not until we actually hand them something that they're able to then look at it and say, this is not what we ordered. This isn't what we were thinking. When we described it to you, this isn't what we were thinking. Well, with agile development, to put it simply, okay, a really simple diagram is you've got where you are, you got where you want to go, where the product people want to go, and they have an idea of how to get there. So you deliver something small, and right away you recognize, holy cow, no, that's not quite what we were thinking. So you adjust, and then you adjust again, and you give them small incremental pieces until it allows you to get to where you want to be. Now, what we have found is actually in all practicality, what actually happens is you've got where you are, you've got where they want to be. They know how they want to get there. You'll hand them something small, and with that fast feedback, now they can give you an idea of where they want to be. Plus, because they've seen something and they've seen how it works, all of a sudden their mind changes. Now you're looking at a different version of something that they wanted in the first place. So you don't necessarily give them what they want, but it changes their mind. They see something working, and it changes what they wanted in the first place. This goes on until literally you are trying to hit a moving target. And ultimately you are able to, because you're giving them small incremental pieces. Okay, so that was how we were able to constantly align our priorities with business needs. It made for less guesswork, and we found that meetings with stakeholders are a lot more meaningful. There's a big difference between trying to explain what you're working on to a stakeholder and ask them questions about it. There's a difference between that and, hey, let's talk about what we just released, what we just deployed to production, take a look at it, play with it, and let's discuss that. Meetings with stakeholders have become much more meaningful for us. Okay? Also, this has made work a lot more fun. And the one way that we've seen that is we hear our stakeholders' approval of our work. And we hear it often. So if you've ever done a big batch file release, the big problem with that is that for the most part, you'll release it and sure enough, there will be bugs. Everybody has bugs, right? But you'll release it and big bugs will come out. You'll find showstoppers, and there's not just one, there's a lot. And it's hard to find them, and it's hard to get them fixed because you've got this huge batch of changes that you've just deployed. You literally are working toward hearing no more from your stakeholders. The less you hear, the better it is, right? Because if you're hearing something from them, it's most likely about bugs. We don't hear that anymore. We hear a lot. Well, we do hear about bugs every once in a while, but there's not been as many. And our stakeholders get to tell us, hey, we like what you're doing. We like where this is going. Can we change this other aspect of it? That has made work a lot more fun. Okay, so back to our the benefits that we've seen. Let's talk about repetition. So this is the good kind of repetition. And what I mean by that is through repeating your process over and over again, you actually increase your confidence in that process, right? You increase your confidence in every deployment because it's done over and over again. You get really good at what you're doing. Now, this includes bugs. Okay, now this is something that is very interesting. So if you look at your process, your deployment pipeline, you've got your different environments that you'll commit changes to in that. So let's say you're doing normal development like what we used to do. We would commit changes, right? They would go through some build process. We'd commit another change. Those would go through our CI. We knew that they would build, and we knew we didn't break it. We hadn't actually broken, made a compile error. But other than that, we didn't have much idea. So we'd get a bunch of these put together, and we would end up with a release candidate. That would go into, QA, and then into stage, and finally out to production. This would happen for, over and over again on everything. Now, along comes a bug. What's interesting about bugs that we found is that they tend to circumvent the whole process. So you'll take a bug, you'll get a really small fix in for it, you'll throw it out into an environment. A lot of times for us, it was stage. We would throw it into stage real quick, and we'd check it, and then we'd deploy it. So this is something we want to stop, first off, because first off, if it's going outside of your process, this is telling you one of two things. Either one, your process is way too slow, and our bug really needs to get fixed. That's a problem with your process. Or it also says, hey, our batch files are way big. We have a small change, and so we have higher confidence in that change because it's just a really small, focused change for this bug. That should tell us something about how we should be doing all of our development, not just bugs. Okay? So as we do this over and over again, practice makes perfect. Okay? When we first started, we made our definition of done for any story that we had it was deployed. That was our definition of done. When we first started, it was not pretty. We made a change and we spent about a week and a half testing that and getting it out. And we did that quite a few times. So we are on a 2-week sprint, which means pretty much every other sprint, we were getting nothing done as far as, the stakeholders were concerned, because we were showing zero progress, because we were still in the middle of a test run that we weren't going to be done with for probably another couple days. Okay. So we wouldn't actually deliver anything except for every other sprint. Now we've gotten to the point where we've done this so much. This last sprint we deployed 4 times, which is phenomenal for us, especially on the project that we're working on. This is a project that not everybody in the company knows or appreciates or wants to work on, specifically because the code base is not great. It's been neglected. We've been able to cut our time down, and this is over the course of, I want to say, 5 or 6 sprints. We had it down to where we were able to not just release, not just deploy once in the sprint, but multiple times in the sprint, until we're to where we are now. We've deployed 4 times, and our goal is to continue doing, getting better at that and getting faster even. Okay, what this did for us is it helped us to identify our pain points. Jez Humble says, if it hurts, do it more often and bring the pain forward. Okay, so what we found that really hurts are, first off, merging. Merging stinks. I don't care. We use Git. Git makes merging a lot easier than most other source control that I've ever used, but it's still, if you have long-lived branches, merging stinks. It's awful. Okay? Writing and executing tests was also very difficult. Manual testing was difficult. That's why it took us a week and a half to get one change deployed, is because we had so much manual testing and we neglected those tests as well. We didn't know which ones were useful and which ones weren't. We just tested the world for every change. Okay. Deploying to production-like environments we do have one-touch deployment for a lot of things, but we are running short on environments. Okay. But then deploying to production was also a little bit painful. Well, it's pretty painful just because we freak out when we're about ready to release, right? Because a lot of times we will find bugs. With doing smaller incremental batch sizes, we have had a lot less bugs, and it's made it a lot better. So anyways, getting back to the other benefits that we've seen from small incremental releases, the next one would be less risk. Okay, so with risk comes an inherent psychological impact on team members' actions. So if there are things that you normally would not do, you might actually do those things that aren't good for your team or the process if you are really concerned about risk. If there is a high risk that what you're doing is going to cause problems, you treat that differently than other things, right? Okay, so we found that with smaller batch files or smaller batch sizes, smaller change sets, we had a lot less risk. So we found that we were less likely to build the wrong theme. This came in a couple different ways. So first off, we were able to pivot. We created new stories that we didn't have originally, and we were able to get rid of stories that we realized weren't going to be necessary. Once we deployed something small, they made a change the stakeholders made a change in what they wanted, and we saw stories go away. Okay, we were also able to assess what was good enough. Okay, so these two things, if you go back to the Agile principles, there is one in particular. So simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. I didn't understand exactly what this principle meant until we started doing small incremental releases. So let's go back to our analogy before, right? You've got where your product is, you've got where you want to go for some feature, you've got some way that you want to get there, and you start giving small deployments, okay? Awesome, that's fantastic. But here's something awesome. What if when you release the third batch here, this change, you realize that the last two changes aren't going to be necessary. You get to the point where you've realized most of the benefit that you were after for that feature, and the stakeholders look at the rest of the desired changes and they can reassess and say, guess what? We've already got most of the value we wanted. These last two aren't worth the effort. We're going to move on to something else. This is good enough. Okay? You cannot do that without releasing small incremental deployments. Okay? So this is very important. Here's something interesting to think about. There was a study done, and they found that far more than 50% of functionality in software is rarely or never used. These aren't just marginally valued features. Many are no value features. Okay, so what if you could get rid of 50% of the work that you've been doing? That would save you a ton of time. Well, guess what? 50% of our time right now has been spent on maintenance tasks. All the things that we have been saying to ourselves, well, we'll get to that, but when we have time, we just got to work through these few more features. Well, guess what? That it never happened. We have other teams that still, there's a lot of maintenance tasks they'd like to get to. They don't get to them because they don't have time. 50% of our time has been maintenance tasks. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well, but it's been fantastic. Okay, so small incremental releases are also quicker to test, and they are quicker to fix. So this goes right along with what Martin Fowler has said. He said, if you can easily change your decisions, this means it's less important to get them right. This right here will change how your developers view a release. They won't freak out as much about it if it's a small release. There's so much less risk. Well, there is so little risk. You drop the risk by that much, they're going to be more inclined to release something and get it out into production. It's been working great. Okay, so with all of the benefits, again, the next one that we found was that we were able to deliver value sooner. There have been a lot of benefits that have come from this that have been very surprising for us. Okay, so first off, we were able to constantly manage stakeholders' expectations. One of the benefits that came from this is that, so our project was due on October 1st of last year, of 2015. We are now in January of 2016. So last October 1st, we were due to have our project out. Right before that, a few months before that is when we changed our process to focus on continuous delivery, okay? We were late for our October 1st deadline. And yet our stakeholders were ecstatic with us. They were very happy with us. In fact, I don't know of any other team out of 8 teams, I don't know that any of the other teams heard positive feedback from their stakeholders because we were all late. But because we had been delivering small incremental value added pieces, they had already realized quite a bit of benefit from our work. We had 2 more small pieces that they knew were coming, but they knew they were coming quickly and soon, and they already had value. So they were very happy with us. Even though, again, we did not hit our deadline. There was another team in particular that was kind of in the same position we were, but because they weren't releasing in small incremental pieces, it was all or nothing. So the fact that they were almost done did 0 good for the stakeholders. Okay, they saw 0 improvement, and so they were very, very upset with this team. Stakeholders feel that we're actually moving faster with this process. So like I said, 50% of our time is spent on maintenance tasks, and yet our stakeholders feel that we are moving faster. We've dubbed this the progress bar effect, right? So if you have a process in your application that takes a while and the whole thing just kind of freezes until it's done, it feels like it takes forever. You just throw up there a progress bar, so you give some kind of feedback to the person using your software, and all of a sudden it feels like it's going faster. That's the exact same thing that we've realized from these small incremental releases. Okay, and this goes right back to one of the principles that I talked about before. Working software is the primary measure of progress. That is what we're talking about. Because you're releasing value sooner and in small incremental pieces, you are able to show where you are. Your stakeholders don't have to ask where you are. They look at your last release, which was probably in the last couple days, and they know where you are. They know what you've gotten done. So this goes back to the very first principle as well. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. That is how you will satisfy your customers, if you're giving them small incremental pieces. Now, even if you deliver something they don't want, you have found out sooner than later they are still going to be happy with you. You will change direction, you'll give them the ability to do it early, and they will be happy with you. So now, the last thing that I wanted to talk about is that small incremental releases it naturally promotes best practices. Okay, I want us to ask ourselves, why aren't we better at doing the things that would get us closer to continuous delivery? We have been talking about this at my work, at my job, for years. For years, we've been talking about this. We hadn't been making a whole lot of progress. Now, I will not say that we hadn't made any progress, but it was going extremely slow. So why is that? We don't have dumb developers, and I'll bet $100 you don't have dumb developers. People that work for you aren't trying to circumvent things. They aren't trying to sabotage things. Then why aren't things getting better? What we found was that many of our current processes incentivize bundling, infrequent integration, and a focus on employee utilization. Now, employee utilization we'll get back to in just a second. I don't want you to take that the wrong way, but a focus on that, is not a good thing. It promotes poor behavior. That is most likely why you're not getting any closer to being more agile and getting closer to continuous delivery. Okay? It's probably in your processes. So first off, small incremental releases, it promotes the incremental implementation of your process. Have you ever heard somebody, in management or whatever, talk about, continuous delivery, and agile development? That's fantastic. We want to get there. As soon as we get this, this other process or whatever set up, we'll get there. That's going to happen. If it is helpful to develop your product incrementally, which is what we are finding, it is very valuable. Guess what? Your process is the exact same. You want to do it incrementally because you're going to make assumptions that are incorrect about your process as well. And if you wait until you have the whole process set up, you're going to be wrong. Another thing that has been fantastic for us that we saw benefits from right away is it promotes better story creation. Have you ever created stories or had your product owner create stories, and as you're working on it, you're trying to figure out why something doesn't feel right? It takes forever to get that story, and that relies on 2 other stories, and if we don't get all those done together, and you end up with this huge change set. What this did was, because we were focusing on I need to get this story done, and done means deployed. I need to have a very well-cut story that is very vertically cut. It's sliced to the point where it can be released on its own. It can add value on its own. It changed totally how we were cutting up our stories, and it helped right away. It also, with small incremental releases, it also promotes writing the right tests. If a test does not help you to deploy your next change, you're not going to write the test. Have you ever written a test for testing's sake? I have. And they usually end up causing problems. They're hard to maintain. They don't add a whole lot of value. Even if they fail, people start to ignore them because they don't add value. You'll write the right tests this way if your focus is to deploy. Also, all team members gain a healthy interest in the deployment process. Have you ever had those few people on the team that are screaming about, hey, we need to do things different, all this stuff, but everybody else is like, whatever, I'm working on something, I got to get this out. Small incremental releases helps everybody on the team focus on that deployment process because that's what you're gauging your success on, and it also promotes team ownership. The entire team is focused on that. You all tend to work together to get that done, which in turn promotes cross-functional teams. If you look at why you would want a cross-functional team, if you're not releasing often, this actually ends up not being as big of a deal if you don't have cross-functional teams. When you try to release very small incremental pieces very often, you're going to find that you're going to need your database member on your team. You're going to need your QA member on your team. Okay, this will become very apparent very quickly. We also found that this promotes best practices in other areas as well. For us, it was training. We were told from the get-go that, the department that's going to have the hardest time with us doing small incremental releases is going to be training, because they don't want us throwing things out there all the time. Well, guess what? They've loved it. They have absolutely loved it. And what we've been able to do is they'll actually, a lot of times for our small releases, they'll just use our release notes for training. They'll just put those out there. And they were able to get back to what they specifically that department's been created to do, which is train people that are just brand new to the product. That's what they would really like to do. With small incremental releases, we've freed them up to be able to do that. Now, as awesome as all this sounds, you might be thinking, well, that's great for you guys and that might have worked out or whatever, but we're the exception. Okay, you're probably closer than you think. For us, we realized we already had a continuous integration process, right? When I commit my change, it automatically kicks off a build. Now, it didn't go through any type of, getting it into a development environment right away. Like, that was all more manual. But we did actually have a continuous, we did have that set up. We were able to work with that. We had set up a DevOps team. Now, I know what you're thinking. We realize as well that is not ideal to have DevOps is not a separate team. It should not be a separate team. But there are changes that we really want to have done that are going to take quite a bit of effort. For us, it's been nice to see that management has realized the benefit of that and in turn has created a specifically dedicated DevOps team to get those things done. We also have a goal to very quickly integrate all those people into the teams so that that becomes everybody's responsibility. We have a culture that values testing. I don't know how you are in your shop, but for us, we actually do value testing, writing automated tests. I don't know how useful all of them were or are, but we do value testing. Okay, and that's been nice. Our teams, we already had Dev and QA working on the same team. We do not have the DB members working on the same team. We are in the process of trying to work with that as well. We've also found that at least some of our stakeholders are open to this kind of change. And what the beauty of that is that if your stakeholders are open to that kind of change, they're going to speak to other stakeholders of other teams. And all of a sudden your other teams are going to start hearing, hey, well, can we see a small change in this? Can we see something small first and see if this is really what we want to do? It's been opening up doors for other teams as well to start to get into this as well. So what to do from here? What do? You got to change your focus. Literally, that's all it took for us. You change your focus. So we changed our definition of done to deployed. And what that did was it made us optimize for cycle time. Okay. So Jez Humble has flat out said, if you want the one-line description of what continuous delivery is, it's this: prioritize keeping the system working over doing actual work. That sounds crazy, but that's the goal. Okay. He says continuous delivery is about optimizing for cycle time. When you optimize for cycle time, you do not optimize for utilization. Your utilization goes down. Your people are not 100% utilized anymore. Now, this is where we get back to utilization. I told you we'd get back to this. So I don't want you to get the wrong impression. People, developers and QA, they're not sitting around. You're more interested in making sure that story gets out and deployed than you are in making sure that each developer is writing code toward that feature, if that makes sense. So your utilization actually goes down as far as utilized as, and what I mean by that is utilized in just writing code towards the feature. Your developers are now actually more interested in how quickly can I take this story and get it deployed. They're going to find weak spots in the process and they're going to be fixing those things. Okay, so technically they are always working and they're always adding value to but they're adding value to your process, not specifically to the story. If you think you're going to have a hard time with management, do what we did and just do it. Now, Our management has been very open to the idea. They allowed us to do it. They knew we were doing this, and they were very open to it. I don't know how it is in your shop, but they have seen so much success from it. We have won them over on a lot of the different points where, things that they were a little hesitant for at first, they are all on board with this now. They want to cut down batch sizes. They want smaller incremental deployments. It's been fantastic. Okay, if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them or read them. Just leave them here in the comments. And thanks for watching.